Hello, this is Dan Nicewonder, and you're watching The Substance Reports, where real substance is the focus. And let's get right into it. I want to talk about the first two Democratic Party debates for the presidential 2020 election. It took place in Miami, Florida this week, June the 26th and 27th, 2019. First of all, both stages, each night had 10 candidates. What's up with that? They all seem to be coming from perspectives of ethnically, racially, sexual orientation, age, all kinds of stuff. Center, more conservative, more progressive. I get the diversity part. The Democratic Party traditionally has represented diversity. I get that. But diversity can be used to distract too, especially if there is someone or something that would maybe lead the pack and stand out, as in having obviously a lot more followers or supporters, at least on the ground and in social media. Anyway, that's just conjecture, but I wanted to kind of put that out there. The first night, I would say, out of the 10 candidates, 9 still came across to me as basically being what I would call corporatized. That either are or would take, for instance, corporate super PAC money. I'm not convinced that anyone but Tulsi Gabbard would not do that. Would take that corporate money. Would not take that corporate money. That being said, Elizabeth Warren, Bill de Blasio are the two I'm going to comment about that kind of stood out, in the sense that Bill de Blasio's comments were political theater. Some people were interested in that. They liked that. I still call it political theater more than actual substance, because anybody could talk progressive. As a matter of fact, from the very first question, I was hearing a lot of progressive ideas that we really heard coming out of Bernie Sanders' mouth 3 and 4 years ago, not from establishment candidates in the Democratic Party. So that was clearly obvious to many of us from the get-go. So you can talk about being progressive and understand progressive. Maybe you are progressive in some way or another. I'm not here to try to make a judgment exactly that you either are or you aren't progressive. There can be varying degrees of it. But I still think the corporatized aspect of the politics is still there 9 out of the 10 candidates that I saw on stage. And Elizabeth Warren, she does have some good ideas. She's obviously done some good research. She's voted progressively quite a bit in Congress, including to support getting out of Yemen, which is a great idea. She does join Bernie on Medicare for all. However, she didn't vote one way or the other. She didn't vote at all for the Green New Deal or for the National Defense Authorization Act military budget for 2020. Essentially, that's what that is. So not voting at all means, well, you're not saying no to the Green New Deal, but you're also not saying yes. You're not saying yes to the hundreds of billions of dollars to add to our already inflated military budget for 2020 now. But you're also not saying no. That's what that says to me. So I didn't expect a whole lot from Elizabeth Warren. I know she was a Republican who turned Democrat as an older adult, and I technically would see that as conservative, regardless of whether she has progressive coming out of her mouth or not. And how long has she been talking tough on Wall Street? It's been over 10 years, right? At least half the country is still struggling. Millions of people lost their homes, jobs, savings, etc., finding no relief over 10 years later. If you're familiar with the Oscar-winning film Inside Job, after the 2008 crash in Iceland, they handled that problem with the bankers pretty quickly, found guilty verdicts and got them in prison, and nipped that in the bud pretty quickly. It's even mentioned, like I said, in that Oscar-winning film, The Inside Job, the documentary. So being tough on Wall Street over 10 years, you've had some support from people. You didn't know how to rally the troops, apparently, as Bernie Sanders knows how to do. So not real impressive. I wasn't expecting a whole lot, to be honest with you. Trying to have an objective perspective here. But I found her even more underwhelming than I was even expecting. So I don't see her leading the way. She does great research, though. So there's a place for her, of course, obviously, in addition to being the senator and being on on these various committees. But as president of the United States, I don't see it. But Tulsi Gabbard, on the other hand, there's some potential there. She, as a real officer, went to Afghanistan. She served as a medic on the front line. She saw what went on there. She saw how our money is being used, how the military-industrial complex works. She saw how interventionist wars are actually done firsthand, in person in Afghanistan. So she could speak from experience and speak the truth, which she communicated extraordinarily well in her style that's very confident, but still very calm in delivery. No political theater like Bill de Blasio, and definitely the standout of the night. There are no such things as winners and losers. I think that's ridiculous. But the primary focus of real substance, the first night, in my view, that's believable, comes from Tulsi Gabbard. Let's go on to the second night. 7 out of the 10 candidates on stage the second night came across to me as that corporate kind of style. They may have some crossover views with progressives, and they may be progressive to a certain extent. There's varying degrees of it, perhaps, but the corporate vibe still came across to me. 7 out of the 10 candidates. The 3 that didn't, of course, Bernie Sanders, Marianne Williamson, and Andrew Yang. And I'll explain why. First of all, Marianne Williamson, I first became aware of her with Course in Miracles back in the 90s. She was, I guess, first known as one of the instructors or teachers of that book. And then I saw her at Occupy speaking truth to power of how morality and love should definitely be blatantly obvious in our politics, whether it's social justice or economic justice issues. I saw that coming out of her mouth at Occupy. So it just made sense that she would be on the stage and she would talk about fighting hate with love. And of course, that's a radical kind of love. She even brought Trump to task, if you're watching, and challenged him with the idea that she is going to fight hate with love. Great. Fantastic. Shows real substance and comes across very well. It's communicated very well. Andrew Yang, in his own way, definitely pointed out the realities of people losing their jobs already because of technology. There's going to be more and more of that as we see more robotics and more AI. And he felt that, with the economy the way it is, that the 99%, if you will, needs some relief. And $1,000 as universal basic income for every individual 18 and over, for him, it makes sense. A lot of people resonate with it. I interviewed him on the Nowman show. So he could speak a lot to a crossover audience, as Bernie can. Because not everybody's going to be spending $1,000 extra on buying some gadget to help Silicon Valley or some company somewhere make money. Some people are going to be spending that $1,000 in frivolous ways or ways that they don't really need. But there's also going to be millions of people that would spend that $1,000 just on what they need to survive. Food, bills, schooling, or whatever, relevant things that would go back into the economy, boost the economy to some extent. So there's more than one side to the story of universal basic income. So that is a topic that really does need to be discussed. And it was good that at least he was able to bring that out to millions of people who are watching, maybe more than that worldwide. So it's relevant. And of course, Bernie Sanders, who has had a whole career of progressive ideas in action. all the way back to when he was mayor of Burlington, Vermont in the 1980s, and then in Congress and now in the Senate. Well, in Congress as a House representative and now in the Senate. So he's been working on ideas with some success for decades, and also working primarily with Democrats and some Republicans, depending on the issues. He caucuses mostly with Democrats, which is why he's running as a Democrat. So he still communicated his messages that many were echoing, as I mentioned. It seemed like from the very first question, the first night, a lot of the content, most of the content, sounded like Bernie Sanders' speech discussion content 3 and 4 years ago. And issues that go even further back in his own political career, to when he was a young man even. So that in itself speaks volumes and speaks for itself. And those who know Bernie's history, they know the content of his speeches in the last few years. They know this is true, that the establishment, the centrist Democratic candidates are just echoing what he's been talking about to get your attention, because they know what he's talking about is popular with a lot of the people. That being said, in Bernie's 10 minutes, he covered as best as he could. 10 minutes is about all he got, by the way. Kamala Harris got a little more than he did, and Joe Biden the most, 13 minutes, I think. And the most substance, as I see, came from Bernie Sanders. Now, the political theater in this second debate, definitely Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. I can't predict or say that this is part of the plan for the Democratic Party going forward in debates. It did look like it was kind of staged, and it was intended to kind of do what it did, make Biden look at least less appealing to some people, and show a woman speaking forcefully on an issue that she has some experience with, of course. But keep in mind, she was the Attorney General of California. She wants to be the Commander-in-Chief as President of the United States. That's not really all of the experience that I would want as someone being President of the United States. Doesn't matter how well you articulate. Again, it's the message, the real substance. Are you going to practice what you preach? Some of that sounds good, or all of it sounds good, but are you actually going to practice anything that you're preaching? Or is it just going to be political business as usual? Anyway, that's political theater. I don't want to spend any more time on it, to be honest with you. I don't think it was the real substantive stuff of the night. Bernie Sanders, what he had to say in those 10 minutes that he had, as well as the fact that his ideas were hugely influential in the whole discussion, even in the question preparation from NBC. That's the real substantive stuff of both nights. I want to read the closing statement to kind of wind this up. And also say that if you want to learn a lot about human nature and how candidates can expose themselves without saying a word, when you can, go back and watch the debate while Tulsi is speaking, while Bernie is speaking, while Andrew is speaking, and while Marianne is speaking especially. Look into the faces of the other candidates. They speak volumes. I just have to throw that in there. And since most of the candidates were covering a lot of the issues, climate change, Medicare for all, and women's choice to do what they want with their own body, and LGBTQ rights, etc., Bernie decided to focus on what he felt the number one priority would be as president. And really, it's number one priority for all of us. As he mentions in his speeches all the time, when millions of people come together, we can demand changes. That's a paraphrase. But it's true. It's called movement building. He's been working towards that his entire life. That's a big reason why he still has a lot of appeal, even with young people, is because he understands that you have to build movements from the bottom up if you want to make change. When we have so many problems as we have now, it's rather undeniable. So I want to read now his closing statement, because when everybody was asked what they would do first, or to try to complete in their term first, here's his answer. I suspect people that are watching this debate are saying these are good people, have great ideas, but how come nothing really changes? How come for the last 45 years, wages have been stagnant for the middle class? How come we have the highest rate of childhood poverty? How come 45 million people still have student debt? How come 3 people have more wealth than the bottom 1/2 of America? And here's the answer. Nothing will change unless we have the guts to take on Wall Street, the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the military industrial complex, and the fossil fuel industry. If we don't have the guts to take them on, we'll continue to have plans, we'll continue to have talk. The rich will get richer and everybody else will be struggling, end quote. That says it all. That, the next to last final statement on the second night of the 2 debates, sums up what I think the most real substance is about here and now, pertaining to what's going on in the democratic process with economic and social injustice, with the extreme wealth inequality, etc., the environmental crisis, all the other social justice crises simultaneously happening. There's the core, the focus of the real substance. And I will be soon on the Nowman show doing a more of an in-depth discussion about Bernie Sanders' recent landmark speech about how democratic socialism really is a way to stop oligarchy, stop fascism, as well as creating a New Deal and a second economic Bill of Rights, all presented from historical context recently. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. But I'll be doing more analysis of it going forward as well, because it's important. It's important. It's information you might have not gotten when you were in school, and a lot of food for thought. And so speaking of that, this is the Substance Report, where substance, real substance, is the focus. This is Dan Nicewinder.